Hey there, before we dive into this project, I want to share with you some troubleshooting steps as you prepare to create these amazing sculptures with your young artist. First thing is you're going to need cardboard, and I like to use my cardboard cutters to trim down the cardboard. It's not necessary, you don't have to have them, but I find that it really helps things go a lot faster when you have this to literally zip through the cardboard. The other thing you might want to have on hand are these cardboard cutting scissors. It's great for cutting smaller pieces. When you create this, you're going to need a square shape for the head. I like to use a shape that's about 5-inch square, no bigger than a 6-inch square. The reason being is when you attach the head to the body with pipe cleaners for the neck, because you've already added so much cardboard to the head, if the cardboard square is too large, like larger than a 6x6, it will do this. Now, if that does happen to your student sculptures, it is fixable, but you have to fix it by having a very short neck. That means the pipe cleaners are a lot stronger. They're more anchored into the cardboard to hold it upright. So just to make sure you don't have that frustration, don't go any larger than 6-inch square. And then you'll want to make sure that you check the cardboard carefully because you want this little wiggly line to be at the top and the bottom. That's how you're going to add the hair to the sculpture as well as connect the neck to the body. So if you're working with your young artist, you might want to draw a little arrow so that they know that part stays up. Again, you're looking for that wavy line. It needs to be running vertically. In fact, you can see the vertical lines to the corrugated cardboard. The other thing you're going to want to do perhaps is add a little curved line for the chin as well as a little curved line for the shoulders. This will also help your artist have a visual knowing that that's the chin, so it should be at the bottom. These are the shoulders, so they should be at the top. But also, if you just share with them to keep an eye on that vertical line running through the cardboard, that'll make it so they can connect the head and shoulders later, as well as add hair. And I'm just using my cardboard scissors to cut or trim this. Not necessary, but I felt like it does make it look a little bit more like a person in the sculpture. Other supplies you're going to need are Elmer's glue all. You definitely don't want to skimp on the glue. Make sure you get Elmer's glue all, not school glue. I mean, it would work in a pinch, but glue all just works best, as well as lots of other cardboard pieces on hand. Cut haphazardly. They don't have to be cut in any certain size. In fact, you might want to encourage your students to trim the cardboard also. If you can manage to have one of those pairs of cardboard scissors, one per table, that'd probably be really handy for your students. Or you can just cut a bunch of the cardboard. The scraps of cardboard were actually my favorite because they really lend themselves to some pretty silly and fun faces. I would encourage students to really take their time and explore making different kinds of faces with the cardboard before anchoring things down with the glue. Once things are glued down, you'll probably want to let it dry for an hour or more. Let the glue sit up before you dive into the next phase of the project. For the next part of the project, you're going to need a permanent marker and pipe cleaners and all of your leftover cardboard, and that's it. All right, so that's your little tip on how to get prepared for this project. Let's dive in. Well, hey there, artists. Today we're going to be creating a hair-raising sculpture by focusing on a lot of different shapes for the face of our sculpture, as well as lines, not only for the hair that we're going to be adding to our wild and wacky hair day sculpture, we're also focusing a lot on lines and how lines can create patterns and designs. Because it's a sculpture, it's going to be able to stand all by itself. So to get started, we're going to begin with cardboard and creating the face for our sculpture. When you have your cardboard, you're going to have two pieces, a square and a rectangle. It's important that you check your square and make sure that this little wiggly wavy line is at the top on both the square and the rectangle. So keep double checking. Make sure that little wiggly line is at the top. Now the top square is going to be for our face. Before we dive into gluing things down, let's have some fun by putting shapes on the square and exploring all the wild and wacky faces that we can make with our shapes. Of course, you can cut the cardboard shapes if you want to. That looks like a really good nose, maybe an interesting shape for a mouth. Try rearranging things. You will be so surprised how your face of your sculpture immediately changes. The best part is going to come with the details. So little things like maybe a circle for the eye or perhaps an eyebrow. Maybe your face could be winking. Perhaps it has glasses. Maybe it looks like you. Some things you'll want to make sure that your face has is a nose. That's what I like to start with. And the nose can be really teeny tiny or really, really big. The bigger or the smaller, the more interesting the sculpture looks. That's my opinion, but you can decide because after all, you are the artist. Don't forget the eyes. Are they both open? Could they both be closed? Is your sculpture sleeping? Is your sculpture winking? And then the eyebrows really help to show the emotion that your sculpture is feeling. Is it happy, sad, upset, angry? Of course, you could add things like a little mustache or, like I mentioned before, a pair of glasses, some freckles. Don't forget a mouth. Is the mouth open? Are there teeth inside? Maybe you want to add a cheek like I'm doing. And then look at your scraps. Scraps can be great. Even the teeniest, tiniest of ones are perfect for things like your eyelashes or any other details that you want to add. Once you've spent a long time rearranging the face, trust me when I say it's a whole lot of fun, and you have a face that you are happy with, then it's time to glue. You'll want to draw a line of glue on the back of the piece before you anchor it in place. When you're gluing, glue goes around the edges, not a big puddle in the middle. And you'll sometimes need to press the cardboard and hold it probably to the count of 10, maybe even 20 to help anchor those pieces in place. Once you're finished with the face, we have to make sure we work on what your sculpture is wearing. So if your sculpture is wearing a shirt or maybe a tie, perhaps there's buttons or maybe even a collar, could be wearing a necklace. Is there a pocket? The choice is yours, but again, have fun playing around with all of those little pieces of scraps. Try looking at the piece of scrap and see if you can envision or see something in it. What one person might see as just a silly shape or an odd piece of cardboard, you might see something like a flower or a bug or a little person or even a dog or a cat that they could have in their pocket. I don't know. You're the artist. Once you have all of those pieces figured out, then once again, it's time to glue. Once you have things glued down, you might want to ask a friend if they think that you could add anything else. Is your sculpture missing something? Like I just realized, that little piece that happened to fly up to the face would make a really good pupil so that the eyes are open. And then I realized, you know what? My nose could probably use some nostrils. So just because you think you're finished doesn't mean that there isn't room for improvement. So you might want to ask a friend for their opinion to see if there's anything else that you could possibly add. And maybe at another table or where another person is working, there's other scraps that might give you a really good idea. Now, once everything is glued in place, we have to let the glue dry for a little while because our next phase is we're going to be drawing on the pieces of cardboard that you added. So it's important that you understand this. The base or the background, the square and the rectangle, we are leaving that blank. We are not drawing on the background. We're only going to be drawing on the pieces that you attached or glued. So I'm only going to be drawing on all of the little cardboard shapes. Now I did use my scissors to add some shoulders, and now I'm going to use my scissors to add some rounded corners here for the cheek and the chin. Okay, it's time for it to dry. Now that it's dry, I've got my idea sheet with lines, designs, and patterns. And using a permanent marker, I'm not drawing on the background, but only the shapes that I added. Looking at the lines, designs, and patterns sheet, what kinds of lines and designs could you create? I decided I wanted to do something a little bit different on each. So sometimes I started with a line like a zigzag, and then if there was more room, I just kept going with lines, designs, and patterns. When a line or a design repeats, that's when it becomes a pattern. Sometimes you could have your patterns match, so I decided to make these two eyebrows the same, but then sometimes I made something totally different. I did want this pupil to really stand out, so when you looked at my sculpture, you could tell it was the eye with some highlights, so I added some circles and then decided to color around them. But what I like to do most was think about how I could break up the space of the shape. So a lot of times I would use lines to break up the space, meaning I divided it up, and in those divided spaces, I added more lines and more designs. So then I sometimes even went back and colored it in. Sometimes it helps when you are working on a pattern or a design to set your artwork down and maybe take a step back or hold it as far away from yourself as you can to really see if your lines and designs and patterns need something a little bit more. So what I decided with some of mine was that maybe I should color in some of my lines and designs. But I am using a really thin marker or a Sharpie, so notice that I'm only coloring little areas. I'm not coloring the whole thing. My poor little marker just wouldn't be able to make it. So that's why we're using it to create lines and designs and patterns. I know your sculpture is going to have all sorts of wild and wacky patterns. I mean, after all, this is like a pattern dude or dudette, so we've got to really load them up. And while you're working on that and drawing these lines, be thinking about the kinds of lines that you can create for the hair of your sculpture. Because after all, this is like a wild and wacky hair day sculpture. So adding some zigzags that you're later going to repeat in the hair would be pretty interesting. And if you finish early, we're going to be putting little small pieces of cardboard at the end of the hair. So if you finish early and there's cardboard scraps sitting on your table that need some lines and patterns, why not work on that too? And if you do finish the face, then you can start to work on the body. Now you might be wondering, how are we going to connect the head with the body? We're going to be using some of those pipe cleaners, that we're going to push through the head and down into the body to create a neck. And that is what will connect the two. Okay, I think I'm almost finished with the head. Let's move on to creating designs on the body. While I'm drawing, you could, of course, be drawing along with me. Sometimes it helps to draw with somebody or create art with somebody so that you can share ideas. That's my favorite part about creating, are all of the different ideas that not only I get, but my friends that I am sitting with or talking to also have. So be sure and share a really great idea or a line design with your neighbor. And of course, remember, if the line repeats, that's how you can create it into a pattern. Now, once you're finished and you have drawn on all of the shapes that are not in the background, but the ones that you glued on, then we're ready for maybe my favorite part of the sculpture, and that's connecting the head with the body and adding the hair. So I'm going to grab some pipe cleaners, a pair of scissors in case we need to trim down some of those pipe cleaners, and that extra stash of cardboard for the next step. To connect the head to the body, you're going to need 2 pipe cleaners, and I'm going to be feeding these through the top of the cardboard. So I'm tilting this up so I can see that wavy line. Push it all the way through till it pops out the chinny chin chin, and then about 2 or 3 fingers away from the first pipe cleaner, I'll add the second one. If you feel like you didn't get it in the right spot, the good news is you can just slide the pipe cleaner out. Now to connect, I have to put the pipe cleaner through the body. So I did poke it into the body and it'll slide all the way down until it pops right out the bottom. Pretty cool, right? And now the two are connected. From here, you can space the head and the body apart a little bit by sliding the head up. But you'll definitely want to make sure that your sculpture still stands. So you'll need to hold it upright. And if the head falls backward, then that means the neck is too long. So give it a good wiggle. If it seems like it's going to stand upright, like mine's doing pretty good on its own, then that neck is a good length, unless you want it a little bit shorter. But I can't make it any taller. Now, those two little pieces sticking out the top of the head that look like antenna, I'm going to bend it because these are the first two strands of my wild and wacky hair day. So I'm going to maybe tilt the head a little bit just to give my sculpture some character, so it looks like the head is leaning maybe from one side to the other. And then to anchor that in place, I can turn this pipe cleaner at the top into a line. So remember, we were drawing all those different kinds of lines, and I told you to think about some lines you might want to repeat in the hair. So I'm starting with a couple of zigzags, but since I only have two, it does kind of still look a little bit like antenna. So now I'm going to take a pipe cleaner, fold it in half, and with a pair of scissors, slide the scissor blade in and snip, because that will give me hair that's about the right length to add more to the top. Wrapping the pipe cleaner around your fingers, you can make things like a spiral. So get really creative with the different kinds of lines that you want to make for your sculpture's hair. The more interesting, the better. Now, as I work on this, I wonder if you can notice something that I added to my sculpture, but I forgot to tell you that I added. Have you spotted it yet? Ears. I added ears. So with two little curved pieces, I actually cut a circle out of cardboard, and then I cut the circle in half to give me two half circles for ears. I glued those to the back of my sculpture, not to the front and not to the side, but to the back. So if you're looking at mine and you think, I'd like to add ears to mine also, then you'll cut out a circle, cut it in half, glue it to the back so that it shows up in the front. And now I have my hair, but it does have little pieces of exposed wire from the pipe cleaner, which we know is probably not super safe. So to make my hair a little bit more interesting and to hide that exposed wire, I can take some pieces of cardboard, draw some designs on it, and slide it onto that pipe cleaner using that wavy line. Now, if you bend a pipe cleaner and you don't like the shape that you made, don't immediately just throw the pipe cleaner down and grab a new one. The pipe cleaner has a wire inside of it. So if you bend it and you're not happy with it, you can easily use your fingers to straighten the pipe cleaner back out and try again. That's the cool thing about the wire being inside, is that it can be bent and shaped many different times. You could even try using a long piece of the pipe cleaner if you want to make long hair for your sculpture, or you can cut them short like I'm doing so far, but I am going to add some longer pieces later. And again, I had a lot of fun adding more line designs, taking a little break from adding hair to create these little cardboard pieces that could be fit over the ends of the pipe cleaner. Now, if you're wondering, how is this sculpture going to be standing? Well, we're going to be adding two little, I'm going to call them cardboard feet, to the bottom of our sculpture. But it does help every now and then to do what I just did, which is hold your sculpture up just to make sure that when it does stand up, that the head isn't getting too heavy from everything that we're adding, and your sculpture starts to look like it's falling asleep because the head goes down. If that does happen, all that means is that maybe the neck is a little too long, or maybe some of the hair needs to be pushed toward the back. We're thinking about what's called balance. We want our sculpture to have balance, and now we're going to add those feet. So I've got these little cardboard feet that I'm going to wedge one in right there, and there's a little cardboard foot there. If you even wanted to draw them like little shoes, you could. I decided to leave mine plain. Let's see if it stands. Would you look at that? Now, if it does wiggle, if it does fall forward, if it's out of balance, as a sculptor as you are, you just need to figure out what's causing the unbalance and adjust it. I decided I even wanted to add some earrings, so I looked for that little wavy line in the cardboard, and I added a little piece of the pipe cleaner in and a little cardboard at the bottom to make some earrings, because you know what? Why not? But here I am checking to make sure it's not getting too heavy. Does it still have balance? And if it's out of balance, how can I fix it? You are the artist. You are a smart artist, and I know you'll be able to figure it out if anything is a little bit out of balance. And if you can't, I bet the artist friends at your table can help you solve the problem. That's the great thing about art, is being a problem solver. All right, I think my sculpture is looking pretty amazing, has wild and wacky hair, lots of lines, lots of designs, tons of patterns, exactly what I was going for, and it looks like it's going to stand, which is great for a sculpture, as they are supposed to stand. I cannot wait to see what your wild and wacky line design, crazy hair day, any kind of name you can come up with, sculpture looks like. I know one thing's for sure, it will be hair raising. Thanks for joining me today, y'all. Have fun and keep creating. Toodles!